And good evening to everybody. Welcome to Pulse on Property episode 8, powered by Residential Estates, April 2023.
Yep.
So I'm Jason Guest, and joining me tonight is James Davis.
Good evening.
And we've got a very special guest this evening. We've got Nick Ponty of Arc Property and co-host of the Scottish Property Podcast.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Hi, Nick. So thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on tonight. We've got a lot to talk about. Nick, thanks for joining us. I know it's you're up there in the wilds of Scotland. And I really appreciate you coming on at this late hour of the day. I know you've got children as well, so much appreciated.
Thanks.
So, just a little bit before we crack on, we're going to be coming back to Nick shortly to discuss the Scottish property market. A little bit of housekeeping first. We run Pulse on Property, as you know, every month. We delve into the current status of the property market, mostly from an investment point of view. So like and subscribe to hear about future podcasts, webinars, etc. We're out on YouTube, Livestorm, Spotify, on the Residential Estates website, as you know. So you can keep track on things as we update them. As always, we like to hear from you guys. So if you want to ask questions, feel free, pop them in chat, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. If we can't answer them due to time, we have got your details. We will send you an email after the event. Feel free to get involved this evening. Firstly, just want to have a quick chat about Residential Estates has chosen Clare House Children's Hospice as their charity of choice for 2023. And throughout the coming months, we are going to be hosting a number of events to raise money and awareness for this fantastic local charity. Clare House is an organisation with roots in the Wirral, Merseyside, North Wales and Chester. And they help and support terminally ill children and their families, providing nursing and making experiences to allow them live life to the full. Bringing back a sense of normality. So a fantastic cause. In fact, 6 of us, including myself and Mr. Davis here, went up. I say went up or walked up. I've actually written down here, crawled up Snowdon last week. How are you feeling after that?
I've just recovered. It was sort of a 2-3 day recovery of walking, climbing up the stairs to go to bed, but I'm back now.
Okay.
But it was tougher than I thought.
You're looking a bit red.
Yeah. Well, that was the sunburn.
Yeah. Okay. But we did that raised. We got a few, just over 100 quid, I think, or something like that. But we've got a goal set for the rest of the year. I think we were talking about doing the 3 Peaks challenge.
Yeah.
But that was before we did Snowdon.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna.
Maybe a cheeky little 2K.
Yeah.
Might be better.
Okay. Yeah. Or maybe one of the peaks.
Yeah.
Another one of the peaks.
I did actually speak to a few people, and they said I was quite embarrassed how unfit I was, and quite a few people did actually say no, it's tougher than you think. It is tougher than you think just to go and do it. And I think we did it in quite a speedy time, didn't we? Under about 5 hours. So we did.
Quite pleased with ourselves.
Yeah, we did well.
Yeah.
For a great cause as well.
Exactly. We'll put the link in chat there to Clare House, the Just Giving page, and the Clare House page on the Residential Estates website. So feel free to support us if you can. By any way, it doesn't even have to be by money. If you can post or share anything to do with Clare House, that'd be fantastic. So moving on, let's crack on with the show. We've got a bit to talk about this evening. I'm going to be talking rising rents in 2023. HomeLet Rental Index shows for March 2023 that the average rental price for a new tenancy in the UK was £1,184 pounds per calendar month, up 9.8% annually, and has risen 0.8% since February. We got rents in every region in the UK have risen monthly and annually. Rents in London 11.8% higher than in March 2022. And even the lowest performing area, the northeast, is 1.6% higher than last month, up to 639 per calendar month. Latest stats collated by the Office for National Statistics show private rental prices paid by tenants in the UK rose by 4.9% in the 12 months to March 23, up from 4.8% in the 12 months to February. And in terms of country level, we've got England increasing 4.6%, 4.4% in Wales. And Nick, you might be able to have a quick come in on this. We've got 5.1% in Scotland in the 12 months to March 23.
Well, let me tell you, that's quite a low figure. I mean, what we're experiencing in Glasgow, I mean, that might be the whole figure across the whole country in Scotland, but in Glasgow, I can tell you that really we're probably up about 12 to 13% over the last 12 months.
Wow.
So crazy rent prices over the last. And although we do have, we'll come on to this later, we do have an actual rent freeze on. You can actually increase the rent in line with the market rate when you come to a change of tenancy or you're marketing a new property. You can rent it at whatever you want.
Okay. Wow. Okay. But like 12%, that's a massive amount.
Massive.
It is.
Yeah.
Just on a bit of a logistics, Nick. Do you mind muting YouTube on your computer?
I have actually
okay.
muted YouTube. I did that already because I was getting a bad feedback.
Okay,
So
that's fine. Could be us.
are you still getting
Oh
an
no, it's
issue?
gone now. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
The world of technology.
World of technology. We will sort something. So we're going to come to you, Nick, shortly and talk about Scotland. Yeah, I mean, obviously 12% in Glasgow. That's massive. In England, we're not seeing. I mean, we're seeing it across the board. In England, the East Midlands saw highest annual percentage change, 5.1%, while the South East saw the lowest at 4.2%. Joint second, London 4.8%, and the people that bought in Hull, they'll be happy. We had a development in Hull, the old Dutch Embassy, Yorkshire and the Humber also coming in at 4.8%.
I'm a bit like Nick on that though. I think those figures are whilst are low, a bit like what you said, Nick. We sold some properties in Hull off plan just over a year ago, sort of 120,000 pound mark. And we based it on a rental at the time was about £600. Now they're completed a year later. They're renting for sort of £750. So, if you do the maths on that, that's like,
I think I've lost you guys.
Like a sort of 20% increase, yeah. So
Yeah, I think the ONS data that you were quoting there, I think they take into account existing rents as well. So the data that I quoted, the 12%, that was for new listings basically, or change of tenancies.
Yeah.
And tend to be in the rental market. You tend to, if you've got a good tenant, you tend to don't put the rent up. You're happy with them, and that's just the way of the world. You tend to increase the rent when they move out if they've been there 2 or 3 years. Quite often, landlords, I've been like that, and I'm like that myself. If you're happy, you tend to not put it up. So you're right. That's probably disproportionate at the figures. I'd say from what I've seen rents increase in 12 months in some places 15, 20% plus.
Yeah. Well, we've got Arla, Association of Residential Letting Agents, confirming there's still a massive undersupply rental properties, with an average of 10 prospective tenants for every rental property marketed. That's a lot. Obviously, massive undersupply throughout the UK. And also reports showing that new landlords still joining the market is declining to what it was. All the hallmarks of the government seemingly wanting to protect tenants, but succeeding, or saying they want to protect tenants, and seemingly or succeeding in hurting tenants due to increase in rents from undersupplies, landlords leave due to lots of new legislation in the market. But me and you have talked about this, and we've seen backtracking on that legislation.
Yeah, big time.
With dates changing.
I think the EPC was going to be. You might know a little bit more, hasn't it? But EPC in the UK was it
or
had to
England,
be a C.
yeah.
England had to be 2026. Had to be a C. I think they've now moved that to 2028, 2029, and they're saying they'll extend it. They've made changes in the sense of you cannot offset your mortgage. your mortgage payments, and the government have introduced these things which have hurt landlords, which are now, I think we're starting to see the pain for tenants because there's a lack of supply, which is obviously lack of supply is putting the prices up, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah. I don't know how you're seeing things. How does that correlate in Scotland?
Well, I think up here things are a lot more stricter in terms of like, tenants have got a lot more. They do have a lot more power, and with our Scottish government, we certainly have put in place a lot of measures to protect tenants. I think that you guys down England, I've been listening to podcasts down England, and they were talking about possibly changing it so that doing away with Section 21, etc. We in Scotland since 2017, we have not had a system where you can set a tenant into a fixed amount of time. So whether it be 6 months or 12 months, we don't have that anymore. So when a tenant signs the tenancy agreement, they can leave at any point. So they can be in the property one day, they can hand you 28 days notice and leave. So they've got much more flexibility.
Wow, okay.
And if you want to evict a tenant, you can't just, it doesn't come to the end of the 6 months and you can get possession back of your property. You need to basically serve a notice on 18 different grounds. You have to either be like selling the property or want it back for your family, or they need to be in rent arrears. So there needs to be a specific ground for taking back possession of the property.
Yeah. Well, they've done similar here, haven't they, in terms of abolishing Section 21, I suppose. But certainly it was new to me, obviously, learning about having no tenancy term at all. That's insane. But surely, I mean, does that get abused at all?
There was a lot of people that were worried about that when it came out back in 2017, and people are just going to use it like for temporary accommodation, like Airbnb. You can imagine the scenario where maybe you're waiting on your new house getting built or something like that, or a property sale falls through and you just need temporary accommodation. Rather than getting a short-term let, you can just get a normal, just a normal.
AST, which is probably a third of the price.
Exactly. But it hasn't really panned out like that. And to be honest with you, if we look at the whole portfolio across the 185 properties that we manage, our average tenancy length is probably about 2 years on average. So you don't tend to get many people. Sometimes you'll get the odd occasion where somebody might have a change of circumstances where they need to leave for a work contract and they've only been in a month or two, and they've got that flexibility.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see it. It's quite a good thing, I suppose.
I think it's just getting that balance, isn't it? It's getting the balance of protecting you want protection for the landlord and the tenant as well, don't you? Because if the landlord's too unprotected, if we don't have enough landlords, we haven't got enough property, have we? I guess it's
when you were saying about it like backfiring, like in terms of tighter government intervention legislation, that has happened up here already with landlords exiting the market and selling up, because we've noticed, in the last couple of months, we've had 3 or 4 landlords come to us, say that they want to sell. They've just had enough, like with the rent caps, the eviction bans, the EPC, the rising interest rates has obviously had an effect as well.
Yeah. Well, it's been massive here, and it's been bandied all over the media. I mean, we've been talking about rent increases, but James, you've been on the front line in terms of selling to your clients.
Yeah.
Have you seen prices, or in terms of prices, but then interest?
Yeah, we're definitely, from what I can see, we're definitely seeing a market adjustment, and we're definitely seeing prices drop. But I think what I've done a little bit of research on, and probably the same as most people on this webinar, we're certainly real experts in our local area, aren't we? We're constantly on Rightmove. I think you were saying your partner's just recently moved, but she's already looking for a next property. So, we're real experts, aren't we, with our local market? And I've really noticed the last few months prices dropping, but just with certain types of property. And from sort of the research I've done and had a quick look at it, it's what I would call the prime residential market that I can see is dropping. And when I mean the prime residential market, for me, that's where I live, in the northwest, is your sort of your 350 to sort of 450, 500, 600 max, 600,000 max. You know, some parts of London that, you know, might be 1.1 million to 1.5 million. But we're certainly seeing a drop in, you know, I can see that where I live. Houses are being sold, have been sold a few months ago, and they're now coming back on. Whether that's down valuations or people can't get finances. But we're definitely seeing, you know, you pick up the paper, the market's going to crash, it's doom and gloom. You know, house prices are too expensive, they've got to come down. But I think, you know, you need to be really cautious of looking at these two types of markets. So your prime residential market, it's sort of your middle to higher prices, are dropping down. My personal opinion is that they need to, and they were overpriced. I think we saw prices go up in these in this market, COVID and beyond, too quickly, you know. And sort of I've got some stats here that, you know, when you break it down from January 2020 to December 2022, detached houses grew by 29%, semis and terraces sort of early to mid 20s, but flats only grew by 12%. So I think what we've seen is almost a false property boom over the last few years, where it's the prime residential properties, example where I live, sort of your 350 to 400, different parts of the UK, and they've gone up, and you know, why is that? Well, I went onto a mortgage calculator 18 months, 2 years ago, you could borrow £500,000 for £1,300 a month. To borrow that same amount of money now as a residential buyer, you're talking £3,000 a month. So we had the backlog of people saving with COVID, saved a bit of money. I think people fell in love with staying in their houses more. So we've seen this sort of boom in prices, which is now slowed down. And I think we probably will see certainly, you know, where I live, and you know, in the northwest, and it may be the same in other parts, a 10-15% correction on these £400,000-500,000 houses, because the high street agents have been able to drive these prices up. Whereas I think if we look at the buy to let market in sort of what I would call £100,000 to £200,000 apartments, for example, there is a massive demand still, as you've just covered. And I think that we're going to see an adjustment of that side of the prime residential market, and I still think we're going to see an increase of what I would call standard 3-4-5% increase in that market, because there is a demand. And you know, you can still borrow, you know, but if you're getting an £80,000 mortgage, yes, rates might be 1-2% higher, but it really doesn't make too much of a difference. And then when you factor in the rents increasing, it's actually a better financial position, because the rent's gone up as much, if not more, than what the interest rates are. So I think we're going to see this two sort of pronged over the next year or so.
Yeah,
just personal opinion.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right on the prices. I mean, I've seen it on a local level. A property near me, and this wouldn't happen in Scotland or due with the gazumping situation, we had a property near me. I'm going to leave addresses and names out of it because I didn't think it was the right. But somebody sold their house in June last year. Then what happened was they obviously they hadn't then found a house to move into. They then saw, as they were looking round, they've sold a house, they've accepted an offer on it. They've then seen the prices hike on their property, and in effect, to all intents, they stalled the sale of their property on the hope that their buyer would pull out. It took them all the way into this year. The house is still under offer over nearly a year later, whatever. It then came off the market. Original buyers have obviously decided enough is enough. We're not waiting around. They then put the property up for a higher price, and then immediately it's sold. But now I can see the same thing happening, because their buyers are now probably looking at the prices coming down, and the same thing's probably going to happen to them. So, you know, I suppose karma and all that.
And we've all seen it, haven't we? I think we've seen in the residential market, we've seen houses coming on near us, and we're like, it's just not worth it. How can that have been 250,000 sort of a year, 2 years ago, and it's now £400,000? It's not. It's gone up. That sort of prime residential market is gone up, I think, differently than it probably does need an adjustment.
But we're talking about, you know, landlords exiting the market, and you're seeing people still interested in investment sales.
Yes, I meant from an investment buy to let sales. I think, you know, this year has been busier. Certainly for me, it's been busier than last year. I think we're seeing a different. We're seeing the same investors we saw last year, but we're seeing an addition of, I think, more experienced landlords who have perhaps not bought for the last few years, and now they know the time is right to buy because there is a lack of supply. But there are some bargains out there as well. There are some people who need to sell quickly, and we're seeing bargains. And I think probably as well is when we've had we're in there's a lot going on in the world. Inflation's high, and I think when it's like that, people look at property as a safer form of investment. We've had 2 international banks go under. I don't think any banks in the UK go under, but we've still had 2 large international banks go under. Massive uncertainty in the stock market. If you've got sort of 120,000 pounds and you can get 6-7% on an AST, you can get 10-12%. Manage it on a short-term let. Even if you don't see any capital growth for the next couple of years, it's still a decent return with the safety and security of buying a property.
I think that's a really good point to make. What you make there, when I said about the landlords, selling up. The type of landlords that we're seeing selling up are the ones who are almost the accidental landlords.
Yes.
So, they might have bought 2008, they might have held on to the properties and they've only got 1-2 properties. And now with the tax changes like Section 24 and all the rest of it, it's just not making sense. But if you're a professional landlord, you're running it as a business and you're building a portfolio and you've got anything from between 6 to 12, it can certainly, like you say, it makes sense, definitely.
Yeah. Funny you should say about the experienced landlords sort of staying in or people looking at that. We looked at our average age of our investors for last year, and it's actually gone back up. And the average age for last year was 49 of our investors.
It's been decreasing year on year.
It was going slightly younger. We're getting younger ages, but now it's going back up.
Yeah.
So I think you're seeing the older generation or people with savings.
Well, I think it links to inflation as well. If inflation's running at 10% and you've got £150,000 in the bank, whilst interest rates you might have been earning 0.5% 18 months ago. Now you find a decent bank account. You probably savings account can earn 3%, but you're still losing 7%. So forget capital growth. You're better off having something that's going to earn you 6, 7, 8% plus, aren't you? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, James. I think Nick, it'd be a good point to bring you in on this. So I'm gonna introduce you and get you in, and we can start exploring the Scottish market. Above the border. So again, thank you for joining us. It's Nick Ponty. If anybody's interested out there in Scottish property, search Nick. Look for Arc Property based in Glasgow. Nick's also the co-host of the very popular Scottish Property podcast. Definitely worth a listen or a watch if you're looking at Scottish property or anything, or even just property in general. I've listened to a fair few episodes now. Really interesting stuff. So Nick, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And you're in Glasgow. I was up in Glasgow for New Year. So me and the other half decided to do 4 nights up in Glasgow. So I am half.
How did you find it? Did you enjoy yourself?
Oh, amazing. So I'm half Scottish. My mum's originally from Kirkcaldy.
Lovely. Excellent.
Yeah, you wouldn't tell from the accent. But I haven't been to Scotland for a year. We're talking over 20 years. But we decided to go up, spent 2 nights in Glasgow, went to Edinburgh for a day, and then spent the rest of the New Year's Eve and the rest of the time in Glasgow. And something, had an amazing time. If anybody's out there, if you've never been to Glasgow, do it. It's an amazing city, absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm biased, but I'm actually from Inverness, originally up in the Highlands, but I've lived in Glasgow since I was about 20, so I've been here over 20 years. Glasgow's my home now, and I absolutely love it as well. So it's a great place.
Do you know something? The people. If you talk about people being friendly, and I was talking about somebody else, and we were comparing people in Liverpool being friendly as well, and comparing them to Glaswegians, and that was the thing that stood out to me. That everybody's so friendly and welcoming. So
Yeah.
So
fantastic.
no pressure.
Yes.
No worries. I mean, I can answer any questions that anybody's got. Obviously, I've prepared a few slides. Slides are not my strong point. I've got to say, I much prefer the chat, like we've been chatting here, guys. But obviously, I can happily talk you through the Glasgow market as well. Anything you want to know about it?
Nick, do you know something? We can put the slides up if you want, but I'm more than happy to just... I mean, I've got a few questions myself. I'd love to know. And if you just want to chat to us about the, in general, I'm more than happy to do that. So if you're happy with that, let's do that.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, well, first of all, how long have you been in property? So why property? What's
Yeah, so originally, I'm actually a photographer. That was my original occupation. So I was a press photographer, and I worked for national newspapers. And basically, it got to the point where newspapers were on a downward trend. They offered a redundancy package. I managed to get a bit of money, and all through my career, I'd been sort of putting money aside and investing in property already. So I had a small kind of buy-to-let portfolio, and that was about 2015. I'd built up a few properties over the years, and then at that point where I took the redundancy, I had a bit more money to go and invest. And I started like educating myself. There's a bit more social media content around about, buying properties and adding the value through renovation, and then obviously refinancing and recycling your money and that sort of thing. So then I started like building up the portfolio. I've now got 12 buy-to-let properties. And when I left the newspaper job, I thought, you know what? I don't want to work for it was a corporate company that I worked for, and I had a boss, and there was a full management team in place, and I just hated it. I just hated having to go in and answer to somebody every day. So with my property experience, I thought, what can I do that I can still be involved in, in property, because that's the only other thing that I know apart from photography. So I thought, I know about property. Can I be a letting agent? Well, I know how to manage my own flats. So yeah, why not? Let's start a letting agency. So in 2017, I started a letting agency, and we now manage 185 properties across Glasgow. Obviously, our own portfolio and other investors that are from all over actually as well. So I'm really enjoying it.
Brilliant.
Oh, amazing! And when did the podcast come into it?
So the podcast came out in 2020, and it was just before the first lockdown. And a lot of people actually launched their podcast during lockdown because it was something where everybody was on Zoom and stuff like that. But actually, me and my podcast co-host Stephen Clark, we actually got together just before the lockdown, so that didn't really have much to do with it. But I think lockdown helped it certainly get off the ground, because people were obviously sitting about. We did some live sessions like this as well, so people were wanting to talk and just connect.
Yeah. Stop people getting from insane, basically. Yeah.
So that kind of like helped us the whole timing of the pandemic and all the rest of it. But yeah, that was 2020, basically February, I think it was, or March 2020. Yeah. So the start of 2020 is when. So we've been going the Scottish Property Podcast now for over 3 years, and I just love it. I mean, I think that the people that we meet and the experience that we get on, and just today, like we were in the studio today recording 4 podcasts, so we just line them up, we bulk record them one after another. And we had a lady who basically over the last 5 years has done £32 million worth of development in GDV, gross development, over 5 years. She just gets 2018, and I was blown away. This woman is like 58 years old or something like that, so she's just like, I went on one of these courses and I put a lot of money out. She said, I just had to go and do this. So speaking to inspirational people, it certainly gives me some inspiration as well. So
what's been your, I always ask Nick, I often ask my clients, what's been your best property investment then, sort of?
Best.
Maybe it might be your residential home, or it might be
Yeah.
to let you down? What's the one that you've really landed on your feet on and made some good money on?
So I guess there's two ways of looking really at the kind of residential buy-to-let property. For me, it's always a long-term play. So look at it 20 years, eventually it'll provide me with a little bit of income when I'm retired or I sell the business or something like that, and I've got some assets behind me. So, there's obviously two things. There's the cash flow, and you've got the capital appreciation as well. So, depending on what you're aiming for, then, in Glasgow, I'd argue that you can actually get a bit of both. So my best property I bought in 2010, and obviously we'd had the financial crash in 2008. There was a lot of repossessions, and it was a good time to buy if you're in a position where you had a bit of cash, because mortgage lending was still quite difficult in 2010. So I picked up this bank repossession for 65,000, a two-bedroom flat in a decent area of Glasgow and Denniston, and I didn't really have to spend that much money on it really. And over the years, from 2010 up to the current day, it's now valued at 155,000. So, you're talking about 13 years. That's insane growth. Just partly because of timing, right? Because that was just the best time to get in, just 2010 to 2014 probably. And then in that area as well, it just so happened that area has boomed in terms of the popularity, the location close to the university, so the tenant demand as well. So the rent has actually gone right up as well, meaning it's a fantastic return property.
Wow.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Amazing. So we've obviously we started talking about prices, and we looked at sort of, I suppose, the property market in general for the UK. How are you finding it? Let's go back to Scotland now. So how are you finding the property market across Scotland and locally?
So it's difficult because there's lots of different data comes out and lots of different newspaper articles and headlines. And if you look at the Nationwide, for example, they'll tell you house prices are falling. You look at Halifax, they'll tell you that house prices are going up. So it's really hard.
You should say that, yeah, because I was talking to my other half the other day, and I was saying, oh no, house prices are falling. And we ended up having this argument because she was like, no, they're not. And then started showing me those articles exactly that, saying they're going up.
I think it goes back to what I said here. I think the houses that have fallen are the stuff that was stupidly overpriced. It was the stuff that agents of high street agents are pitting themselves against each other. Oh no, I'll put it on for that. I'll put it on to win the business, and they were, because it was so dog eat dog. People were paying the prices, whereas now they're not paying it. So I think that's where we're seeing the drops, aren't we?
I think we've definitely seen the heat come out the market. So in Scotland, right, I mean, if you go back to coming out of the first lockdowns and up really till about probably summer, June, maybe July last year, probably right up until actually the mini budget in October. People are putting houses in the market. You guys would have seen this as well. So up in Scotland, we have a thing called the home report, right? So everybody wants to sell a property in Scotland. You are legally, and you have to basically legally provide a home report, which is a RICS qualified surveyor's report of the property, and they value the property as well. So you actually get a valuation. So, say your property is valued on the home report at £200,000. The estate agent might put it on the market for offers over 190. Usually, they price it just under the home report valuation. People in certain areas were paying. I mean, I heard one story where it was like it went for £80,000 over the home report value. So that's just insane. I mean, you guys would have experienced that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's obviously a little bit different. We don't have the home reports, but a little bit what I said earlier. That was what was happening. You were looking at houses, thinking, it's probably worth 350, 400, and it was coming on at 450. You knew it wasn't worth that, but there was that stupid time where you said the heat's come out of it, where they were actually selling for that price, weren't they?
I still think, and again, I'm not naming names, and I've got whatever. Getting political here, etc. But there are also certain agents that you pay up front with, and because you pay up front, they've already got their fees.
Also,
Therefore, they're not. There's no interest there in selling it because they're not working on commission. Therefore, for them, listing there's a lot of reports about overpricing due to that.
Why get a price reduction?
In effect,
So I think
that there's definitely a downtrend now, because if we look at the month-on-month data, and I tend to look at the land registry data, because it's actually recorded sales prices, right, rather than Rightmove data, which is asking prices. The problem with the recorded sales prices is it lags a couple of months. So we're just April now. We're getting the data that was came through the in February, I think, like that. So we're getting February's house prices in April. So already in Scotland, we've seen like on three or four consecutive months, we've seen a negative. So it is definitely dropping down from those peaks of, say, 13+%. Dropping now, I think it's slowed to prices over the previous 12 months are still up, but I think we're like up about 1% over the whole of Scotland or something like that. So the more and more it chips away each month, negative 2% each month, eventually we're going to fall into negative house prices over the 12-month period. And I anticipate by the time the year end is out, probably like yourself, so will be a market correction of maybe 10%. We might be down 10%, but then if you think about where we've come from since 2019, you could still be up in the last 2-3 years by about 10%, even if we fall 10%.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And I think people forget that, don't they? So it's the way the media portrays it, and they'll look at that, and at the end of the year, you'll get, we've had a crash. Well, is it really a crash? No, not really.
Yeah.
And you're probably the same, Nick. People ask me all the time, when is a good time, or do I wait for it to bottom out? Do I wait? When's a good time to buy? The honest answer, you probably summed up there, Nick. A great time to buy would have been 2010. Not wait another year, not wait another 2 years. The time. I'm
kind of guilty with that, because obviously, I'm looking to expand my own portfolio, and I've got a bit of cash just now, and I'm thinking, oh God, do I really want to be buying at the moment? And it is that kind of way. You do listen to people, and what's the phrase that they say? It's time in the market, as opposed to time in the market, right? So I think there is a bit of that. But there is a bit of like, if you get the timing right as well, you can be super successful, like I told you about that one in 2010.
But even if you get the timing wrong, 5-10 years down the line, you're still going to have done really well, aren't you? It's not,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, we've got some properties in Aberdeen for you.
You have.
We have.
We've
got a development in Aberdeen, so reaching into Scotland. In general, so Nick, in terms of getting onto the rental side of things, I know we've talked about it a little bit, but how are you finding things? Are you seeing that, we talked about Arla saying there's 10 people lining up for one property. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, and again, this is why I think, buy to let, if you're a portfolio landlord, can still make sense despite the rising costs and the government legislation, because we've got such a shortage of supply housing in Scotland. I mean, I think it's pretty much the same over the whole of the UK, but we are experiencing huge demand, especially in Glasgow, because we have 3 big universities that are world-renowned: Strathclyde Uni, Glasgow Uni. People come from all over the world. They're really targeting foreign students now as well, because they make more money out of them. So we get a lot of people, foreign students. We get a lot of people coming for work as well, relocating from India, Pakistan, in the kind of finance sector too. We've got a big Barclays Bank campus, brand new campus that's just opened up in Glasgow as well. So there's a lot happening in the city. So as soon as you put a decent property up for rent, we've got 60 to 100 inquiries. Our record was last summer was 550 inquiries for one property. Wow. It's just nuts. Like, I mean, that's not normal, but
that's insane. That's insane. So I mean, I'm guessing as well. That's obviously, we've talked about the rent increases you've had, but that's obviously the effect of that. I mean, that's. Are you looking at rents now, and have they calmed down, or are you still looking at things going, wow, that is that is still increasing or insane in terms of rental value?
Yeah, no, I mean rents, like I said, are going up like 12%, year on year for new listed properties. When the landlord has the ability to, when you have a change of tenancy, for example, I own one myself that the tenant moved out. And it sounds terrible, but you usually, as a landlord, you'd get the notice from the tenant, and you'd be like, "Oh no, that's a shame. That tenant's been great. Been with us like three years. Hardly heard from him. Like he's been maintained the property." But now you're like, "Oh God, yeah, it's like a relief because the government have clamped down and put these restrictions on us that we don't have that flexibility. When you get your end of your fixed rate 5-year fixed rate term mortgage and it comes to an end and it doubles like overnight, we don't have that flexibility of putting the rent up to meet the costs. So when the tenant hands a notice in and we can re-advertise the property, then for example that one that just came back on there, it went from £850 a month up to £1,200 a month, and that was only a 3-year tenancy the guy had been in. So that shows you how things have come along. In terms of the Scottish Government, they've put on a 3% rent cap. Basically, it was 0% from September up to the end of March. And then they reviewed it and then they said, right, for the next 6 months, you're allowed to put your rents up by 3% up to 6% if you have a special case where you've got like increased mortgage costs, or your insurance costs have gone sky high or something like that. But it's very, very restricted. But certainly if you're a new investor and you're buying a new investment property in Glasgow, then you don't need to be worried about that because you can go straight in at the market rate.
Yeah. Oh wow. In fact, similar. I was very lucky. I'm soon to move in officially with the other half into her property because it's a lot nicer than mine in the centre of Chester.
Well, that's a big step for you.
But I was renting.
Yeah, it is. You don't even know him.
I was renting a 1-bed flat, and very nicely of him. My landlord didn't put up the rent for the whole time I was in there, and I was in there for about 5 years in total, 4 or 5 years. And my rent was $550, and I've just given notice, and it's a terrace that's been converted into 2 flats, first ground floor and first floor. I was on the first floor. The ground floor one's just been put back up for rent at $850. Yeah. So he's. I think he's probably pleased that I'm now going. As nice as it was of him, it means he's going to be able to relist it. Maybe not for $850 because that one's got a parking spot. But he's going to be able to put it on at $750, at least $750, $800, and get that. So we're seeing it across the board.
I mean, a lot of people think that obviously, we always get a bad press as landlords and property investors and all that, and I do a lot on social media and I get a lot of landlord hate, I called it, people saying that you're hoarding all the houses and it's your fault that rents are going up and all the rest of it. I've got to say, we do a lot of affordability checks, make sure that people can afford the rent. So the people that we're renting out to for these high value properties, these are professionals that are working in good salaries, £70,000-80,000 a year and stuff like that. So they're able to afford the rent. We're not exploiting people. We're not taking advantage of people who are on benefits and stuff like that.
Exactly. I mean, I've just given an example as well. My landlord quite happily 5 years, and he kept the rent the same for that amount of time. And it was purely, I spoke to him. He's in property anyway, and he's the sort of guy that because I was paying the rent on time, for him, he'd rather have a reduced rate and make sure that there's somebody in there for a long time than not. And most landlords are sensible are like that. So
Exactly, and that's where the Scottish Government have shot themselves in the foot by putting in these restrictions, because it's caused an even more shortage of supply. And what the problem that's happening is that I speak to loads of landlords. I was one myself who I've got properties where I've never increased the rent for 5, 6, 7 years because you value a good tenant and you don't want to disrupt them, and they should feel safe in their home. But the government have really forced our hand and taken this 3%. So pretty much every landlord across the board now is like, well, I don't know when we're going to be allowed to up our rents again, so I'll just take the 3%. So yeah.
Well, that's that's need I say it, government for you. Yeah.
It's
It's definitely.
So, given that I've got talking about the differences in Scottish law and English law, I've mentioned it briefly about the legally binding offer situation. How does that impact drop off rates in terms of sales up there?
Um,
so I'm
So
not
I'm not
hugely
hugely
involved in
involved in
sales,
sales, I've got to say, but I think there's a bit of that. I don't know if you guys, I mean, when you hear stuff about the Scottish market and that, I mean, obviously when you get your offer agreed in writing, you're entering into like a legally binding contract, right? When your solicitor submits the offer and stuff, but and then you get the acceptance back. But right up until what they call when missives are concluded, which can be quite late on in the process because they have to do a lot of stuff, checks, searches on the property, mortgage stuff and all the rest of it before you actually sign the missives. The buyer or the seller can withdraw and drop out with no kind of risk or no recourse.
Okay. So
So
isn't that
yeah,
typical?
I don't know.
You do get the same situations then, people offering and then pulling out and.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because usually, say it's a 6 week process from start to finish of buying a house, or 6 to 8 weeks, or whatever. I suppose 6 weeks should be quite short. Say 8 weeks. Sometimes the missives are not concluded up until like 2 weeks before everything completes, or like even sometimes a week before.
Yeah.
So I guess it's quite good though. That does actually stop it. Some stuff happens in the first weeks, but when you're getting really far to the process, when you are far to exchange completion, I suppose it does stop those drop-offs right at the end, which are, as a buyer, as a seller, are the when it's be frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's happened to me a couple of times when I've sold properties, and it's really frustrating. But so nothing's really that safe either in Scotland when it comes to sales process.
I mean, I say that as an example near me, very close to me. They had their property on the market under offer for 10 months or something. If I was their buyers or whatever, I'd be going insane.
Right.
But it is what it is. We have had a question.
There is a couple of things. I don't know. I put a slide up there. If there are people, because I'm presuming your audience is predominantly based in England, so I guess the slide that I prepared that has the kind of differences in Scotland might be worthwhile chatting through quickly. I don't know if we've got time.
We can do that. Let's. We've got
so I just think. So you've got like the home report, what I touched on earlier, which is I think it's a great advantage because you've got a qualified surveyor going out there. Okay, they don't pick up absolutely everything, but you can pretty much get the gist of what the issues are with the property. So if you run through to the third slide, I think it is, what to look out for when buying property in Scotland.
There we go.
Right, okay, that's fine. There's a bit of a delay when I'm watching it on YouTube. So you've got the home report. That gives you a valuation, current market value, and it gives you a description of the condition of the property. So it'll pick up on out-of-date wiring, any sort of damp or condensation issues. It'll maybe touch on that. So these are quite good for highlighting any problems. It'll also give you an EPC rating, which is obviously very important at the moment as well. And that's free.
Nick, just quickly on the EPC. Obviously, we were talking about in England they've actually changed the legislation slightly to increase the time on that. Have they done the same in Scotland, or is it you've got to have it up to a C rating by? Is it next year?
So what they kept on changing the goalposts again. I mean, just typical government stuff. They come out with these things, and they've got different quotas to reach and all the rest of it. But they kept on delaying it, and now eventually they've come out and said that by 2025, all new tenancies will need to have a minimum EPC of Band C, and all existing tenancies will need to have a minimum C by 2028. So basically all properties by 2028 will need to have, if you're a landlord, you rent out a property, will need to have a minimum C, which is quite a scary thought, I've got to say. Especially in Glasgow, we've got a lot older housing stock. properties lying at, D's, E's, loads of
I
them.
was going to say, driving around, there's a lot of like the terraced areas, etc., and a really nice looking architecture and buildings, but there was a lot of old buildings around there driving around. I can see how that would be a bit of a scary proposition for people.
Exactly. So that's the home report, and that's free for the buyer. So you can phone up the estate agent and ask for the home report, and then you can just, without even viewing the property, you can get a really good idea of what condition it's in. So I think that's really useful for people to know. Moving on to sorry, that's my bad spelling there. So in England, I know you have like freehold and leasehold for like blocks of flats and all the rest of it, but generally in Scotland we don't have the leaseholds. That's not something that we have. We have a thing that's just called de factors, and basically they're just like the management company in charge of the communal maintenance, where you'll pay a kind of monthly fee to.
Similar to, or like you say, similar to that, but it's so your monthly fee is still similar to the standard service charge, isn't it?
Yeah, service charge, but we don't have the leasehold or the 90. Sometimes you hear these 99-year leases or whatever it is you have in England. We don't have that generally.
Yeah, so there's no time limit.
There's no time limit, no. So that's another kind of advantage I feel when buying like flats and stuff. One of the negatives that just came into effect, again, it's another Scottish government thing. This came in December and it literally happened overnight. Like originally we had a 4%, you guys call it stamp duty or additional, we call it additional dwelling supplement tax. Okay. So if you're an investor and you're buying an additional property or a second home or whatever, you guys have got a 3%, I believe. Yeah. So we had 4%, and then just overnight, like just before Christmas, they decided no, it was going to 6%. So we now double what you guys pay. Which is a hefty whack if you're buying, like, say you're buying in Edinburgh, for example, where values are high, £200,000 property or something like that. 6% on that is quite a bit.
It is
a big chunk.
Is that still in? Is that similar to here? On what? When does that kick in?
That's happened
already. Literally, they didn't consult anybody on it. It like happened like that overnight. That came into effect back in December, middle of December 2022.
Wow. And at what level of price of property?
You don't pay anything up to £40,000, and then it kicks in after £40,000. But you can get properties in Scotland for under £40,000, but you really wouldn't want to be like managing them, or you wouldn't want to be going to visit them.
Yeah, you're going to be spending a hell of a lot more on them. Okay.
Yeah,
oh wow.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And you'd probably come out and your car wouldn't be there. So obviously in Scotland, like I touched on, there is more tenants' rights, and the government, Scottish government, it's the SNP party, are in a power sharing kind of coalition with the Green Party, and obviously part of the Green Party's agenda is that they're very heavy on trying to get tenants' rights, and really fighting for the tenants. So I think that has had an impact on us up here for sure. And lastly, just as we talked about already, the EPC, which is coming in with you guys as well. Yeah.
So you obviously mentioned you've seen people exiting, but you're obviously a letting agent. So how are you finding levels of stock in terms of like coming on, new business coming on?
Well, that's where I was
saying. Like, we've tried to focus on the portfolio landlords and the professional sort of buy-to-let investor. Rather than, say for example, a couple that get together and they, bit similar to yourself, mate, moving in with your partner and all that.
I'm not saying,
I'm not saying, I'm talking about that scenario. I'm not talking about you, but
talking about,
a couple come together, they've each own a property, they move in together, and then they've got one to let out, and they're all almost by default, they're possibly like an accidental landlord. Do you know what I mean? So we tend not to go down that route. So we're actually doing all right because our existing clients, a lot of them are still buying, and we offer like sourcing service as well. We'll help them find the property, refurbish the property, and all that. So our model is sort of set up that at the moment, even though landlords are selling up, our landlords are really actually, a lot of them are still buying. So we're still adding to our portfolio.
It's a good model. I mean, in terms of, it's similar to us in terms of a company. We sell investment, we source investment product, but we also have a very long-standing short-term letting and management department. So a lot of the investment products and developments we source, we look to offer the short-term letting management on those as well. So and that's because we have a global network of agents. So we to sell to investors globally, and for obvious reasons, a lot of them can't manage it. So we offer those management things. So it's nice. A lot of people are looking nowadays for that hands-off sort of experience, I suppose, or be able to invest in property, but they don't want they don't have the time to deal with it. So
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And if you can still get, like you were talking about the earlier guys, what else you going to invest in? I mean, if you can still get, if you look at the bottom line, the cash flow, and even with these higher interest rates, if you can still get an 8%, return on your actual money, or 8 to 10% return on investment, what other asset class really is that good at the moment?
You're not going to get. I mean, I guess the only other thing, like what you would probably do is maybe like your stocks and shares. I'm getting from a bank, but that comes with a much higher risk in having to trust somebody who knows what they're doing a lot. It's not something I've never done. But
we did a webinar podcast a few months ago where we explored the different, if you had a certain amount of money, 100,000 or whatever it was, and looked at different things to purchase and what you'd get from it. I think, was it whiskey the only one that... I think it was whiskey, the only one that came out...
I think you've got gold, haven't you, that's had sort of peaks and troughs. Yeah. But, if you look at it over a 10, 20-year period, you're going to struggle to beat property, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had one question in from Jane, who's just asked Nick about... And I think you're going to be a little bit biased here, but they've just asked like a decent place to consider buying property in Scotland.
It's got to be Glasgow.
It's got to be Glasgow. It's got to be Glasgow. Well, listen, you were talking about Aberdeen there, right? So you're having some business interests in Aberdeen, and my podcast partner Stephen, that's where his portfolio is, and they've bought like about 40 properties up there, all through buying below market value. Because what happened in Aberdeen in 2014, when everywhere else in the country property prices were going up, they actually had a crash because of the oil. Because basically their market works off the oil and gas market, and the oil industry declines. So there was huge opportunity up there, and there still is. So, he really goes for Aberdeen. They always try and get me to go up there, but I'd very much like to stay to my own area that I know.
Yeah.
Well,
the thing is, you hit the nail on the head with Aberdeen in terms of, I mean, it's a great story with that, and for some people, I think you've spoken to investors who would probably say initially, why Aberdeen? If you search Aberdeen on just, and we go back to Medium, what you can search for, to a lay person or naive, you'd search Aberdeen, and it would show at the bottom of all stats and things like that in terms of
the last 10 years.
Growth and things like that. Yeah. So in terms of, you think, oh Christ, why Aberdeen? But it's that old adage, if you start to hear about a place to invest in, you probably missed the boat already. And we've got, well, I'm not going into detail, this isn't a sales, we're not here to do that, but certainly the development we've got is right around the corner from the Shell head office, after Shell's moved back into the area, after they moved out. And it's got all the hot signs and hallmarks of being a cracking place to invest in.
Huge investment going into the offshore green energy and stuff. So it's
exactly. If Jane wants to reach out to me, obviously I'll put my details up, and she can get in touch, and I can sort of send her on the right direction. I mean, I can give her a few options, but obviously, as you said, I'm biased with Glasgow. I don't think you can go wrong because you can get a bit of capital growth, and you can get good yields as well.
Yeah. And finally, Nick, predictions for this year and next year, or as far as you want to go.
I just think that we are going to struggle to get this inflation under control. I think that I love all the economy stuff, and I've really been learning a lot and keeping up to date with it all. I find it really fascinating. But I think that you get these reports out by, I think it was the OBR, it's going to be back down at like 2.8% by the end of the year. Which then people are saying, oh well, interest rates will be back down. And I just can't see it. I just can't see it's going to come back down that quickly. I think we've got the Brexit effect that we're still going to be dealing with, wage inflation now as well, all the strikes that we've got and people getting 10% pay rises. It's obviously going to add to the problem too. And I think inflation is going to be stickier than what they're trying to make us sort of think. So looking at that, and then you think to yourself, well, how does that affect property prices? Obviously, if that keeps interest rates high, people are going to be coming to the end of the fixed rate term mortgages. You're going to have forced sellers. I definitely anticipate. I can't see how property prices can't drop by at least 10%. So I think we'll be about minus 10% in property prices. But I still think rents are still just going to keep going up because we have a huge chronic shortage of housing stock right across the UK, and that is not going to be solved. Like, there's no solution to that, an overnight solution. That's going to take a whole generation, a major shift in government policy to solve that problem.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so still a good time to invest.
Yeah, still a good time to invest because if prices are going down and they're not crashing, then obviously as an investor you're looking to negotiate and pick up a deal. Obviously, where it becomes a little bit scary is at the kind of refinancing point. And do you still have your loan to values? Are you still able to get your 75% loan to value? People that are paying down the debt are going to be in a much stronger position. So people that are getting the 65%, loan, the portfolio down to 60%, you're in a much better position. Mines are pretty highly geared at 75%, but if we do have a crash and it's looking quite bad, then that's obviously the people that are going to get badly hurt.
Yeah. Danielle, just before we wrap things up, I know we've taken up a lot of your time, Nick, so much appreciated. Just a quick, we've had Danielle ask, are your personal investments all AST, or do you have any STL?
I'm not familiar with these. I think these are English.
So yeah, are they all standard long-term lets, long-term standard tenancies, or are they STL in UK would be short-term lets or service?
Short-term lets, right, or just standard
like Airbnb, Booking.com type of stuff. Yeah.
So all mine are actually just the long-term lets. I did go through a phase because I'm quite, I get kind of hooked in with the shiny penny kind of strategies and stuff like that. So I kind of got hooked into the Airbnb kind of craze and all the rest of it. And I did switch about 3 or 4 of my own ones to the serviced accommodation model. I was managing it myself and it quickly became a really huge job, and I found myself immersed in the hospitality sector where I was dealing with guests that were wanting instant service, and I just couldn't hack it. I couldn't handle it, so I bailed out, but they were making good money.
Yeah. Did you, Danielle's gone on to ask if you had STL, which you obviously said that you dipped into that. How did you find the new license process?
So our licensing in Scotland has just kicked in literally this year. So I think by October, everybody needs to have the license in place. The councils took ages to kind of get the process in place where you had to apply for a license. So we're just getting set up on that at the moment.
Okay. So recommendation would be to use a company like ourselves, basically.
100%. And but that's interesting because when I looked at the figures and I looked into them and they're going to take 18%, I looked at it and thought, right, I'm actually going to only be a couple of £100 a month better off, and is it really worth it? So that's why I switched them back to long term.
Yeah. But we get it. I think we get it a lot of the time. We've got examples, certainly, and it doesn't happen everywhere. Like you say, if you're getting the returns and for the hassle, that's fantastic. We've had a few situations. I hear you guys when people say, "Oh, what are your management terms?" And if you say 18-19%, they'll go, "Oh, God, yeah, but long-term lettings is like 10%."
Yeah.
But if you can then identify if it's the right thing and you can still get a decent return.
Well, I think we've had some figures, and our short-term let guys have done it. I think if you sort of manage it yourself, you put it on your Airbnb and just manage it yourself, you're probably looking around about a 50-55% occupancy rate, which equates to roughly the same or a couple of £100 more than an AST, which obviously what you encountered, Nick. But if you use a company like ourselves where we're driving that occupancy to 70, 80, 90% and 100% in some cases, even after the 18%, we generally find that you're getting double on a short-term letting.
Well, that's obviously where I went wrong, guys. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I should have found a company like you, then I would have been all right.
And we can do you a good deal. So Nick, I really appreciate it, and I know you've got children, so apologies to them dragging
that's
away for the last hour. But that's been really, really helpful, and a lot of information there for guys, and certainly anybody watching and interested in the Scottish market.
Definitely.
So really appreciate you coming on tonight, Nick.
My pleasure. Been good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. It's been nice to meet you, Nick.
Yeah, really good. Anybody watching, again, link will be in chat there, and we'll post it in the description. Search Arc Property in Glasgow. I'm sure Nick would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
And anybody interested, obviously, can send messages to us. We'll pass them on to Nick. And if you're on Spotify or even YouTube, anywhere else, search the Scottish Property Podcast. Where you will see Nick and his co-host talking all things property and Scotland and everything else. Really good, worthwhile watching those. Again, we'll put the links in chat and description for you. Thanks again, Nick. We've also got a lot of free information for landlords and investors all over our website, location guides, FAQs, podcasts, blogs, etc. Again, links will be in chat and in description. Feel free to reach out, send us a message, and we will help with whatever your property needs. So leaves it for me to just say thank you again to Nick and James.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you guys and everybody watching. Thank you for the team behind the scenes, Abby and Ian, for doing all that. Like and subscribe to hear for future episodes. And I think next time, it's not Pulse on Property next month, but Michael Holliday is discussing current investment opportunities, and he's talking to a financial advisor about lending and much more. So join us for that, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you all for joining us.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.